Like a suburban spy? What started as paradise turned into a war zone with sabotage, fake laws, and one woman hellbent on stealing our backyard. Welcome to Ridgebrook. When I first sketched out the plans for our backyard oasis, I died. I wasn't thinking about boundary disputes or bored suburban tyrants. I was thinking about my wife Amy lounging under the sun with a book in hand. I was thinking about my 10-year-old son, Jake, cannonballing into the deep end. I was thinking about peace and barbecues and early evening swims with a cold drink waiting. On the patio table. After years of working my tail off as an architect, after 6 years in this house on the edge of Ridgebrook, we were finally making our dream real. The permits were approved by the county. The contractors were professional. Every stone, pipe, and bolt had been carefully reviewed, signed, and inspected. This wasn't a reckless DIY job. It was a calculated, long-awaited milestone. Our home sits just past the jurisdiction of the Ridgebrook HOA on a strip of land that was subdivided before the HOA was formed. A technicality, but a legally binding one, and I made damn sure of that when we closed. We broke ground in early March. By May, the pool was filled, the pavers laid, the grill installed. And I'd even added solar lighting and a sleek cedar fence. Around the property line, we had about 30 feet between us and our neighbors, which made the backyard feel like a private little haven against the dry Nevada hills in the distance. The only thing left was to enjoy it, and we did. Jake spent entire afternoons doing laps and diving for plastic coins. Amy brought out wine glasses and cheese plates and basked in the sun like a queen. I grilled, I swam, I read on the lounger. It felt like we'd won the lottery without ever buying a ticket. Then one afternoon, as I was floating on a foam mat, eyes closed and brain blank, I felt it. Movement. A flash of shadow above the fence line. Not a bird, not a tree limb, something tall, human. My eyes popped open just in time to see a blur of khaki and floral print tilt forward in the corner of my vision. A sharp yelp split the air, followed by a thud, a splash, and a scream that was only half swallowed by pool water. I jumped up. There, sprawled on the pavers near the pool's shallow end, was a woman, soaked, tangled, and looking half-stunned. Amy came rushing out with a towel over her shoulder, and we both just froze for a moment. The woman scrambled upright, one arm cradling her elbow, the other pushing her dripping bob haircut out of her eyes. Karen, Amy blurted out. It was her. Karen Venter, president of Ridgebrook HOA, lived 3 houses up the slope. Known for her perfectly trimmed hedges, her relentless lawn code emails, and the permanent squint she reserved for anyone not using beige patio furniture. Karen didn't say a word. She spun on her heel, slipping slightly, and darted for the gate. I called, "Out! Hey, what the hell were you doing on my fence?" But she didn't stop. She fumbled with the latch, flung it open, and disappeared up the hill like a soggy raccoon. Mamie and I looked at each other in stunned silence. "Was she watching us?" she asked. "Climbing the damn fence," I said. I dried off and threw on a shirt. Storming out through the side gate, Karen's house was dark. Her porch was empty. No car in the driveway. Either she ran home and ducked inside or bolted straight past and around the corner. Either way, she didn't come back. I called my brother. Later that night, he's a retired sheriff's deputy out in Elko, and told him the whole bizarre scene. He asked if I'd filed a report. I hadn't. What was I going to say? My neighbor launched herself off a fence to catch a glimpse of my splash zone. It sounded ridiculous. But something about the way she moved, intentional, stealthy, left a knot in my stomach. The next morning, I ordered 4 weatherproof security cameras and a new floodlight for the backyard. Amy thought I was overreacting. Jake thought it was. Awesome, me. I just had a bad feeling. For days passed without a word from Karen. No apology, no explanation, no passive-aggressive HOA bulletin slipped under the door. Honestly, I started to wonder if she'd knocked something loose when she fell. Maybe a touch of humility, but that fantasy didn't last long. Friday morning, right after I got Jake off to school, and before Amy left for her shift at the clinic, I stepped out back to check the new security camera feed. Crisp images, full perimeter coverage. I was just starting to relax when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Karen standing on my front porch like nothing had happened, flanked by two other Ridgebrook HOA board members. One of them, Greg, I think his name was, held a clipboard. The other, a tall, sore-faced woman in tortoiseshell glasses, had a little lapdog poking out of her purse. Karen naturally was holding a manila envelope. "Good morning, Mr. Hastings," she said, smiling like we were old friends on a sunshine stroll. I didn't bother smiling back. "Are you here to explain why you were climbing my fence?" Karen ignored the jab and handed me the envelope. "This is a formal notification from the Ridgebrook Homeowners Association regarding your recreational installation." Recreational installation. She gestured vaguely toward my backyard. "Your swimming pool?" I glanced at the envelope but didn't open it. "Karen, we've been through this. I'm not part of Ridgebrook. My house sits outside your jurisdiction." I checked. "Before we bought, and I triple-checked before construction." She nodded sympathetically, like a kindergarten teacher about to correct a clueless child. "Yes, we're aware technically your lot is excluded. But Ridgebrook's visual impact zone includes all properties visible from within the HOA boundaries. That means your pool falls under our extended aesthetic and communal use review. Visual impact zone," I repeated, genuinely stunned. "That's not a thing. It's part of the updated community guidelines we adopted last quarter," she said smoothly. "Any structure visible from Ridgebrook homes must comply with our shared values." I blinked. "My pool doesn't even face your neighborhood directly." "You had to climb a damn fence to see it?" She pressed her lips together. "I was performing a fence integrity review. It's within my rights as HOA president to verify boundary maintenance." Greg Clipboard Man nodded, like this was the gospel truth. The woman with the dog sniffed dismissively. Karen continued. "Now the board has voted to extend recreational access rights to adjacent properties. This includes equitable sharing of amenities such as swimming pools where community cohesion would benefit." "Is that a legal phrase or did you just invent it in your car?" I asked. "Mr. Hastings," she said, her tone cooling, "and you may not realize this, but withholding recreational access can be considered exclusionary. Some have even argued it borders on discriminatory practice, especially when it comes to facilities adjacent to shared visual zones. You're demanding I give you access to my private pool because you can see it from your window. Access for the Ridgebrook community," she corrected. "Just a gate code or key. Nothing invasive." I laughed. "Short, sharp, involuntary. You're not getting access to anything. Least of all after spying on me and falling into my yard like a cartoon villain." Karen smiled and faltered, but her eyes darkened. "That incident was unfortunate, but let's not let personal misunderstandings interfere with neighborhood harmony." "Get off my porch, Karen," I said. "This is harassment. If I see you near my property again, I'll file for a restraining order." Greg made a noise, maybe an attempt at a warning, but Karen held up her hand. "You do what you feel you need to do, Mr. Hastings, but I'll remind you, the longer you resist cooperation, the more this becomes a legal matter. We'll be in touch." They turned as a unit and walked back down my driveway. I watched them go, then looked down at the envelope still in my hand. I opened it out of morbid curiosity. Inside was a community notice of shared immunity request, stamped with the Ridgebrook logo. No legal seal, no county approval, just a lot of HOA speak and mad up. Regulations. There was even a paragraph on acceptable hours of use for shared pools. I walked inside, set the paper on the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. 10 minutes later, I'd emailed a lawyer. 20 minutes after that, I reviewed my property deed again. Just to be sure, every line confirmed the same thing. My land was free, private, and absolutely outside of Ridgebrook jurisdiction. Later that day, Amy and I reviewed the new security footage together. We watched Karen and her entourage stroll up the drive like royalty. And then we rewound 2 nights earlier when she'd been crawling along the back fence trying to get a better look at our patio lighting. Clear footage, full face, high resolution. That night I uploaded every clip to a secure cloud drive and labeled the folder HOA Madness. Something told me I'd need it soon. I thought that would be the end of it. Seriously, I figured Karen had made her play, issued her bogus notice. and slinketed it back to her little HOA kingdom, hoping I'd be intimidated into submission. But Ridgebrook's royal pain wasn't done. She wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. It was Sunday afternoon, just before noon. Ami was inside prepping lunch. Jake was drawing chalk monsters on the patio, and I was fixing the pool skimmer elbow deep in leaves and dog hair that didn't belong to any dog we owned. When I looked up, I saw her Karen. She was back, but this time, she wasn't alone. 3 other women had walked through the side gate, my locked side gate, which now hung open, and were calmly making themselves at home. Folding chairs, tote bags, a Bluetooth speaker. One of them was already spreading sunscreen on her legs. Another had brought what looked like a smoothie in a mason jar. I froze. My brain couldn't quite process the sheer audacity of the scene. These weren't protesters. They weren't angry. We're treating my backyard like a damn country club. Karen, I called, marching toward them. What in the actual hell do you think you're doing? Karen looked up from her reclined position on one of my loungers and smiled sweetly. Hello, Trevor. We just thought we'd enjoy the lovely weather. You've done such a wonderful job with this space. It would be a shame for it to go to waste. Go to waste? I sputtered. The board voted to assert recreational integration, she said, sipping from a tall glass with a metal straw. It's not personal. We're simply acting in the community's interest. Amy had stepped outside by now and stopped dead in her tracks. Jake was halfway through, drawing a 3-headed lizard mouth agape. You're trespassing, I said, pointing toward the gate. That's private property, and you broke in. Ren shook her head. You're mistaken. The gate was unlocked, and you've already received notification. If you continue to bar access, we may have no choice but to escalate this as a civil rights concern. You're denying recreational access to community members based on property line technicalities. Amy laughed out loud. You're out of your mind. One of Karen's backup dancers, a younger brunette with a clipboard and a fake laugh, chimed in. Refusing to share amenities visible from common roads has been challenged in court before. We could file a claim under the open use zoning clause. There's no such clause, I snapped. It's being reviewed in other jurisdictions, she answered smugly. I turned and walked straight to the house, pulled out my phone, and called the Sparks Police Department. I kept it simple. Illegal entry, trespassing, potential civil harassment. Dispatch said someone would be by shortly. Karen and her friends didn't flinch. In fact, they turned up the music and started passing around sliced watermelon. Amy asked them to leave twice. They refused. About 20 minutes later, a cruiser pulled into our driveway. Officer Reynolds, a guy I'd spoken to once before about a stolen Amazon package, stepped out. His eyebrows rose when he saw the pool party playing out in my yard. Karen stood, immediately drying her hands with a decorative towel she'd taken from our patio table. Officer, so glad you're here. There's been a bit of a misunderstanding, Mammy said not unkindly. We received a call about trespassing. This isn't trespassing, she said, motioning to the clipboard woman. We're invited. I held up my phone. Security footage says otherwise. They entered through a locked gate. One of them jammed the latch with a credit card. Reynolds sighed and looked toward the women still seated by the pool. I'm going to need you all to collect your things and leave the premises. Karen stiffened. We have rights, officer. No, Reynolds replied calmly. You don't? Not here. Not today. Pack it up. To their credit, the women didn't argue. Too much. They muttered. They smirked. One of them deliberately knocked over a plastic flamingo, but they left. Karen made a point of standing directly in front of me and whispering, You'll regret forcing our hand. As they walked away, Reynolds turned to me. You might want to talk to a lawyer. If they try this again, you can request a restraining order. I'm already ahead of you, I said. The next morning, my lawyer, Diana Barnes, filed the necessary paperwork. We compiled the footage, the community notice, and Reynolds' report. Within 72 hours, a temporary restraining order was granted against Karen Venter. She was legally barred from entering or approaching my property, not within 100 feet, not with company, not with fruit trays and sun hats. Amy and I finally exhaled. That night, Jake Cannonell into the pool, screaming something about pirates. I watched the floodlights buzz on as the sun dipped over the hills and felt for a second like we'd regained some ground. You'd think a restraining order would be the final word. A legal boundary, a clear court-stamped, no trespassing sign. For about 2 weeks, it seemed like it worked. No Karen, no sudden appearances, no clipboard invasions. Amy and I even started to relax. The weather stayed hot, the pool stayed clean, and Jake stayed in a permanent state of sunburn and goggle hair. Life felt almost normal again. Then came the knock on the door. It was a Tuesday morning. Amy had already left for work, and I was just sitting down with my second cup of coffee when I heard it. 3 polite, almost hesitant raps. Bendy. Door to find a young couple standing awkwardly on the front step, mid-20s, both wearing athleisure gear, both holding reusable water bottles. They looked like people you'd see shopping for quinoa in Whole Foods. "Hi," the woman said brightly. "Sorry to bother you. Just moved in around the corner on Lilac Drive," the man added. "We were told you might be willing to let neighbors use your pool once in a while." I stared at them for a beat, my brain connecting. Dots before I consciously could. Told by who? The woman smiled wider, but it was a little too rehearsed. "Well, someone from the neighborhood mentioned that you were offering occasional access, sort of a friendly thing." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "Do you happen to remember who told you that?" The man looked off down the street. "We didn't get a name, just a recommendation in the Ridgebrook Next Door group." There it was, the bitter little HOA gossipive. I let out a breath through my nose. "This is private property." "No, I'm not offering community swim days. Whoever told you otherwise is mistaken." He mumbled apologies and walked off quickly. But something about the exchange sat wrong with me. Not just the way they'd approached, too confident, too rehearsed, but the fact that they mentioned Ridgebrook at all. My address isn't even listed as part of that community. Someone was spreading deliberate misinformation. That night, I checked the Ridgebrook HOA Facebook group. Not directly, of course. I don't have access. But my buddy Jeff, who lives 2 streets over and despises Karen with the burning passion of 1,000 suns, sent me screenshots. In one post, a concerned resident had suggested that my pool used to be part of the shared community plan before being annexed away through loopholes. No names, no evidence, just enough passive-aggressive speculation to stir the pot. By the end of the week, it got worse. Thursday night, around 11 o'clock, the motion sensor lights in the backyard tripped. I checked the feed on my phone and saw 2 figures, adults, walking along the outside edge of the fence. They paused by the gate. One of them pointed toward the water. The other pulled out a phone and took a picture. I called it in. By the time officers arrived, the trespassers were gone. No damage, no entry, but it was clear they were surveying, maybe scoping the place, maybe testing the response time. Either way, it rattled me. Saturday brought a new twist. Around noon, I spotted a sedan parked across the street. No Ridgebrook decal, no local plates. A guy sat inside, mid-40s, sunglasses tapping on his phone. He stayed there for over an hour. When I finally walked up to his window, he rolled it down just a crack. "You lost?" I asked. He shook his head, just waiting on someone, watching a construction site. "There's no construction here," gave a tight smile. "You sure?" I stared at him for a long second, then walked back to the house. The whole exchange felt like something out of a bad thriller. "Just observing," he said, like I was some sort of urban planning case study, eh? That night, I reviewed every frame of footage for the past 5 days. It's the couple who knocked, the 2 figures near the fence, the man in the car, one of them, the guy in the car I recognized, not from any neighborhood function, but from a screenshot Jeff had sent me the week before. He'd been standing next to Karen at a Ridgebrook HOA fundraiser, right behind her, hand on her shoulder. Coincidence? Maybe, but I wasn't in the mood for maybe anymore. I emailed all the footage to Diana, my attorney. She responded within the hour. "We're going to need to start documenting these as a pattern. If this escalates, we can file for protective action beyond the restraining order. But you need to stay vigilant. This is coordinated. Coordinated." That word settled in my chest like ice, because she was right. This wasn't spontaneous neighbor curiosity. It was a slow, creeping campaign. Disrupt pressure, undermine. Karen hadn't vanished. She'd changed tactics. Now it was quiet, indirect, and just slippery enough to skate under the law. Amy started keeping the blinds closed. I installed 2 more cameras. We stopped letting Jake play outside alone.
Oh.
Our dream backyard had turned into a perimeter, and I knew we hadn't seen the worst of it yet. I hadn't planned on seeing my name in a zoning committee agenda. Not that week. Not ever. It started with a voicemail from a guy named Wayne Trebisi, a civil clerk at the HOA County Land Use Office. Polite nasal, the kind of voice that sounds like it wears a tie to sleep. Hi, this message is for Trevor Hastings. We received a supplemental application concerning HOA boundary realignment that may involve your property. Could you give us a call back to confirm a few things? I called him within the hour. Sorry, he said, flipping through papers. This kind of thing usually doesn't reach private parcels unless there's some overlapping easement or UH. Here it is. Parcel 84,061. Looks like someone filed a petition to extend the Ridgebrook HOA boundary lines. Claims the neighborhood's recreational. Infrastructure and visual cohesion include your lot. I blinked. Come again? Petition cites adjacency, aesthetic continuity, and shared infrastructure. Wants your property, and 2 others read, designated as part of Ridgebrook. Who filed it? Gerald Wallace. At least that's the signature. I didn't know any Gerald Wallace. Can I get a copy of the application? I asked. Technically, it's public record, Wayne said. But I'll email you a scan. He did. And within seconds of opening it, my stomach sank. The name on the petition was Gerald Wallace.
Sure.
But the mailing address listed under the applicant, it was Karen's house. Same font she uses in her HOA newsletters. Same awkward phrasing about visual integrity and community harmony. The whole thing was so obviously her handiwork, it might as well have been written in lipstick on my bathroom mirror. I called Diana. She was quiet for a few seconds after I explained it. She forged an application to redistrict your land into HOA jurisdiction, she said slowly. Looks like it. She filed it under someone else's name. Yep, this isn't just HOA harassment anymore. This is criminal. I'm escalating this within a day. Diana had pulled property records, committee correspondence, and Karen's known prior filings. She handed everything to the county prosecutor's office with a formal letter requesting investigation into identity fraud, document falsification, and attempted property annexation without consent. Meanwhile, Amy and I waited like 2 people watching a kitchen timer wired to a pipe bomb. 3 days passed. Then I got a call from a prosecutor's assistant. It confirmed that the real Gerald Wallace had no knowledge of the petition. He was a 72-year-old retired piano teacher who'd moved to Carson City 5 years ago. Karen had apparently dug up his name from old neighborhood paperwork. He used to be on the Ridgebrook Landscaping Committee. When the county investigators arrived at Karen's house, she claimed it was a misunderstanding, clerical error. She said she'd intended to file the request on behalf of the board and must have accidentally used the wrong contact details. They didn't buy it. She wasn't arrested yet, but she was now under formal investigation. That night, I poured myself a stiff drink and sat out by the pool. The lights buzzed faintly. Jake was asleep. Amy came out with a blanket and sat beside me without a word. We didn't need to speak. We both knew what this meant. Karen wasn't just watching anymore. She wasn't even just trespassing. She was trying. To rewrite the map, literally, I checked the camera feeds one more time before bed. Everything looked normal, but I'd stopped trusting normal. And deep down, I knew Karen had one more card to play. It happened just past 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't hear the alarm. Amy did. She shook me awake with one hand while dialing 911. With the other, "Someone's in the yard," she whispered, eyes wide, still tangled in the sheets. I bolted out of bed barefoot, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the dresser, and checked the monitor. Motion alert. South side of the yard, near the pool equipment shed. 2 dark figures, both in black hoodies, one carrying what looked like a duffel bag. The other was crouched low, fiddling with something near the filtration system. By the time the police arrived, they were long gone. But the damage wasn't. The filter housing was cracked in half. The PVC lines were sliced open, and someone had poured what looked like quick, dry cement straight into the intake valve. A chemical smell lingered in the air like a hangover. One of the officers knelt down near the utility box and tapped the residue with his pen. "You're looking at deliberate sabotage," he muttered. The next morning, the pool looked like something from a dystopian resort. Water levels were off, sediment swirled in strange patterns, the jets coughed. Jake came outside, still in pajamas, saw the mess, and looked at me like I'd broken his birthday present. That stung worse than the repair estimate. Over $15,000. That's what the pool tech said. Between the destroyed filter, the cut piping, the clogged intake, and potential damage to the pump motor, we were looking at a full teardown, Amy cried. Not big tears, just a slow, exhausted leak behind her sunglasses. I reviewed the footage again with Diana. The two intruders were careful. Heads down, no license plate, gloves. But the taller one, his gait was familiar. The way he limped slightly on the left leg. The way he hunched when crouching. I recognized him. It was the same man who'd once sat in the car across the street, pretending to be watching a construction site. We turned over everything to the police. 3 days later, they brought both suspects in. Neither had a criminal record, just local creeps with too much time and too little conscience. But when faced with the full weight of the charges, trespassing, destruction of private property, conspiracy to commit vandalism, they cracked like eggs. One of them had screenshots, text from Karen. She hadn't just encouraged them, she directed them. How to get around the motion sensors, what tools to use, where to aim to make it look like a mechanical failure. One message in particular made me stop cold. His wife will beg us to take them into Ridgebrook after this. Let's just ruin his little water park fantasy. Amy read it over my shoulder, then she turned and walked away silent. Karen was arrested the following morning. The police picked her up at home. She was in a bathrobe mid-latte. According to the officer who later testified, no resistance, just a sneering, half-confused mutter about how she was just trying to help the neighborhood. They didn't cuff her in front of her house. Too polite. But she still left in the back of a cruiser, watching me through the tinted window with the dead, glassy look of someone whose empire had just collapsed and still couldn't quite accept it. The official charges were brutal: criminal mischief, trespassing, solicitation to commit a felony, conspiracy, destruction of private property, identity fraud, and obstruction. Diana said the DA was going for the jugular. No deals, no plea bargain. The case had gone too far, and because of the restraining order already in place, and because her crimes involved coordination and coercion, she wasn't getting out on bail. For the first time in months, the street was quiet. There's no knock at the door, no shadow in the backyard. No Facebook rumors about community standards, just whined through the fence in a broken pool I no longer had the energy to fix. Trial to downtown Reno, citing media interest in potential jury bias and sparks. Not that I blame them. By the time the first hearing rolled around, the story had already hit local news and several HOA watchdog blogs. One even ran the headline, "Karen tried to annex a pool. Now she's facing prison." Pulitzer-worthy, but it got the point across. The courtroom was bigger than I expected. Cold marble floors, unfriendly lighting. Karen sat at the defense table. In a blazer that probably cost more than our entire pool filtration system. Her hair was tied back. No smirk, no clipboard, just the quiet, trembling air of a woman who'd finally discovered that consequences were real. Diana looked like she'd been carved out of ice. "Don't speak unless you're asked," she whispered to me, "and don't react." Number. Eye rolls, no chuckles. They'll try to rattle you. They did. Karen's lawyer, a slick guy in a shiny gray suit named Mitchell something, opened with the word misunderstood no fewer than 5 times. According to him, Karen was a well-intentioned leader concerned about safety and had accidentally misinterpreted neighborhood statutes. Then came the evidence, the texts, the footage, the fake zoning petition, the schematics Karen had drawn herself on HOA letterhead marked with highlighter and labeled potential community integration plan. Then there was the kicker, a voice memo. Karen had sent to one of the saboteurs. She dictated it at night, probably after a few glasses of whatever HOA presidents drink when drunk on power. "Don't damage the decking, just the pump. If it leaks, he'll blame the manufacturer. Keep it clean. Use gloves. I want that pool out of service before next Monday. The courtroom was silent after they played it. Not dramatic silence, just empty. Like the oxygen had gone stale, Karen shrunk into her chair. When it was my turn to testify, I told the story plainly. How we bought the house as a private escape, how I built the pool myself, how Karen had never once been invited over, but had somehow turned my yard into her battlefield. How my son had cried when the pool broke and my wife had stopped sleeping. Through the night. When Diana was done with redirect, the jury looked at Karen like she'd kicked a puppy in front of a kindergarten. She tried to take the stand. It was a mistake. She wept. She rambled. She talked about community values and broken visual standards and how her actions were just about keeping property values up. At one point, she even accused me of enticing her onto the fence by building something that flashy. One juror actually snorted. Verdict came in after less than 3 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts, the judge, an older man with a slow voice and a visible hatred for suburban melodrama, gave her 11 years. No parole before 5. The courtroom gasped. Karen sobbed. Her lawyer stared at the floor. Someone in the back muttered, "Good." Later, Diana told me that the real impact wasn't just Karen's sentence. It was the fallout for Ridgebrook. The HOA board resigned en masse within a week. The treasurer had quietly signed off on Karen's community outreach budget and was now under investigation. One board member fled the state. Florida probably. They always run to Florida. By month's end, Ridgebrook had entered court-ordered administrative reform. Their bylaws were suspended, their budget frozen, and their enforcement privileges revoked until further notice. It was a bureaucratic implosion with the satisfying crunch of a collapsing sandcastle. As for us, I hired a new contractor to rebuild the pool. Not just fix it, improve it. Reinforce the lines. Install extra motion sensors. Add a vertical garden wall with blackout panels facing Ridgebrook. Just for fun, I had a metal plaque mounted on the gate. Private property HOA access prohibited by court order in bold in all caps and stainless steel. The silence was almost jarring at first. After months of tension, sirens, court dates, and concrete sabotage, the sound of nothing felt louder than any of it. No knocks, no clipboard-wielding neighbors, no parked cars across the street with strangers watching construction. Just wind, cicadas, and the occasional splash from our newly rebuilt pool. Amy finally started sleeping again. Jake asked if he could invite friends over, real ones, not the kind Karen tried to manufacture through legal intimidation. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Watching him cannonball into the deep end was the first time I truly felt like we had our home back. The new pool setup, a fortress, upgraded systems, reinforced piping, tamper-proof housing, floodlights with motion sensors, and cameras with redundant off-site storage. I even ran a secondary power backup off a solar grid just in case someone got creative again. Call it overkill. I call it therapy. We also got new neighbors, real ones. The Jacksons bought the lot down the hill. Young couple friendly came by with banana bread on day 2 and asked 0 questions about HOA politics. When I warned them about Ridgebrook, they laughed and said, "We Googled everything before buying. We want less community, my people." Diana helped file the final paperwork with the county. The property was now officially designated as autonomous residential outside the Ridgebrook district, immune to future annexation attempts. Not just by HOA bylaws, but by a protective clause embedded into the land use deed. Ironclad, bulletproof, beautiful. A week after that, a letter arrived. It was typed, no return address signed, only a concerned former board member. It read, "You weren't the first, but you were the last." "Thank you, Amy," framed it. The press died down eventually. Karen's name stopped trending. The watchdog forums moved on to some HOA in Arizona that banned residents from growing tomatoes. But for a while, our story became a cautionary tale. Suburban myth whispered in real estate offices and city council meetings. One day, a local reporter called me for a follow-up. "Any regrets?" she asked. I thought about that, about the nights I stayed awake staring at cameras. About the look on Amy's face when she saw the pool broken. About Jake asking me why grown-ups were being so mean. About watching a woman fall off a fence into my yard and still think she was in the right. No, I said finally. Just one. She leaned. In expecting drama, I smiled. I should have installed the camera sooner. Click. Interview over. That weekend, I stood in my yard with a beer, staring at the pool. Sunlight bouncing off the surface like polished glass. Jake was laughing with his friends. Amy was reading under the umbrella. No shadows, no threats, no HOA, just home. Rewrite in same length.